You're standing at the ironing board. You push the iron across your best shirt. The collar still won't lie flat. You go over it again, and again, same wrinkle, staring right back at you. Maybe a faint shine where you pressed too hard. Maybe a little brown mark you'll be hiding all day. For years I thought that was me. My hands, my cheap iron, my lack of patience. It wasn't. And it isn't you either. The truth is, your iron comes out inconsistent because of three small things nobody ever bothers to explain, and once I fixed them, my shirts came out crisp on the very first pass. No fighting, no going back over the same spot 5 times, the same clean result every single time. These aren't tricks somebody invented to sell you a gadget. They're the same things my grandmother knew when she pressed clothes with a heavy iron she heated on a wood stove. That knowledge survived, because back then, a scorched shirt wasn't an inconvenience. It was money you didn't have. Gone. And by the end, I'm going to show you a sole plate trick I found buried in a home economics bulletin from 1931, using one thing already sitting in your kitchen cabinet. It brings a sticky, dragging iron back to life in about 2 minutes. Every bit of this works with the iron you already own. You don't need to buy a thing. I still remember the morning it all clicked for me. It was the day of my niece's wedding. I pulled out my good blue shirt, filled the iron, waited for the light, and dragged it across the front. A brown streak appeared out of nowhere, right across the chest. I had no backup. I stood in my kitchen at 6 in the morning, holding a ruined shirt, feeling like a grown man who couldn't do the simplest thing. That was the day I started asking why. And what I learned changed how I've done this ever since. So let me start with the thing sitting inside your iron right this minute, because it's quietly sabotaging you. Think about what you pour into that little tank. Tap water. Everybody does it. I did it for 30 years and never thought twice. Here's the problem. The water that comes out of your faucet is full of dissolved minerals, mostly calcium and magnesium. You can't see them, but when that water hits a hot metal plate and flashes into steam, the water leaves. The minerals don't. They stay behind, baking onto the inside of your iron and clogging up those little steam holes on the bottom. The United States Geological Survey has measured this for decades. More than 85% of homes in America have what they call hard water, water loaded with those minerals. In a lot of the Midwest and the Southwest, the hardness is so high that a brand new iron can start clogging within a couple of months. Now here's why this ruins your shirts. When some of those steam holes are blocked and others are open, your iron doesn't push out steam evenly. One part of the sole plate is steaming, the next part is bone dry. So you're pressing damp fabric and dry fabric in the same stroke, and the wrinkles behave differently in each spot. That's your inconsistency, right there. It's not your hand shaking. It's the iron putting out steam like a garden hose, with half the holes plugged. And it gets worse. Those trapped minerals eventually break loose. That's the brown fleck, the white crust, the little spit of dirty water that lands on your white collar right when you're already running late. That mark on my wedding shirt? Mineral buildup, not a scorch. The iron spat rusty, crusted mineral water onto the fabric the second I hit the steam button. I used to think that meant the iron was worn out. So I'd throw it away and buy another one. $30, $40 every year or two. I probably went through 6 or 7 irons in my adult life, and every single one of them died the same slow death, clogged, spitting, uneven, and I blamed the machine every time. Here's the fix, and it costs almost nothing. Stop using tap water. Use distilled water. A gallon of distilled water costs about $1 at the grocery store, and it lasts me the better part of a year. Distilled water has had the minerals removed, so there's nothing left behind to clog the holes or bake onto the plate. My steam stays even. My iron glides, and the spitting and the brown flecks simply stopped. My grandmother did the same thing without a store-bought jug. She caught rainwater in a barrel for her ironing because rainwater is naturally soft, almost no minerals in it at all. She wasn't being quaint. She figured out generations ago exactly what the science says now. So that's the first thing, even steam. But even steam only matters if the water underneath it is doing its job, and that's where I learned I'd been getting the whole process backwards. Because here's the question that stopped me cold. If steam is what removes wrinkles, Why did the best pressed shirts I ever saw come off an iron that barely steamed at all? Let me explain what I found, because this one changed everything. Steam that puffs out of the top of your fabric and disappears into the air does almost nothing. Wrinkles come out when the fibers of the cloth get damp all the way through, then get flattened and dried in that flat position. The dampness relaxes the fibers. The heat and pressure set them, the drying locks them flat. That's the whole secret of ironing, and most of us are only doing the middle part. When you iron a bone-dry shirt with a few bursts of steam, you're heating fibers that never really softened, so they spring back. You press, it looks flat, you lift the iron, and the wrinkle slowly creeps back like it was never touched. Sound familiar? That's not a bad iron. That's dry fabric fighting you. Now here's how they solved this before anybody had a steam button. It was called sprinkling, and it is hands down the single biggest improvement I ever made. Go back 100 years. There was no steam iron. Irons were solid blocks of metal heated on the stove. They called them sad irons, and the word sad there is an old English word that just meant solid or heavy. A woman named Mary Florence Potts patented a famous version in 1871 with a detachable wooden handle, so you could keep 3 irons heating on the stove and swap the hot handle between them, because a single iron cooled off too fast to finish a basket of laundry. With a solid hot iron and no steam, the dampness had to come from the clothes themselves. So the night before ironing, they would sprinkle the clean, dry clothes with water, roll each piece up tight, and pack them all in a basket or a cloth. Sometimes they'd leave them overnight. The rolled up clothes sat there for hours, and the moisture spread evenly through every fiber of every piece. Uniformly damp, not wet in one spot and dry in another, evenly, thoroughly, all the way through. Then they ironed, and because every fiber was damp to the same degree, every stroke gave the same result. Consistency, that word you've been chasing. I tried this the old way, feeling a little foolish, with a bowl of water and my fingertips flicking droplets over a dry cotton shirt. I rolled it up, I let it sit while I made coffee, maybe 20 minutes. Then I pressed it. I have never seen a shirt go that flat that fast in my life. One pass. The collar lay down like it was ironed at a laundry. I actually laughed out loud in my own kitchen. You don't have to wait overnight like they did. Even 15 or 20 minutes rolled up makes a night and day difference, because the water has time to spread instead of just sitting on the surface. If you're in a hurry, a spray bottle of plain water misted over the fabric right before you press beats those useless little steam bursts every time. The dampness needs to be in the cloth, not floating in the air above it. Think about what that means. The most reliable pressing method ever used needed no steam function at all. The steam button on your iron, the feature they charge you extra for, the feature that clogs with minerals and breaks, was never the important part. The dampness in the cloth was. We got sold a machine to do a job that a bowl of water does better, but even perfectly damp cloth will let you down if you get the next part wrong. And this is the part where I was making a mistake so basic I'm almost embarrassed to admit it, because it's about heat, and I had it upside down. Here's the trap. You'd think hotter is always better. More heat, faster ironing, right? That's what I believed. So I cranked my iron to the highest setting and left it there for everything. That is exactly how you scorch a shirt, and it's another big reason your results jump around from garment to garment. Different fabrics need very different temperatures, and it isn't a small range. Cotton and linen want it hot, up around 400 degrees Fahrenheit. But polyester and other synthetics start to melt and glaze at less than 300. Silk and wool sit somewhere in the middle. If you iron them all on one setting, half your clothes are too cold to press properly and the other half are cooking. That shine you sometimes see on dark dress pants or a suit jacket, that's not dirt. That's the surface of the fibers actually starting to melt and go flat and glossy from too much heat. Once a fabric glazes like that, it's usually permanent. I ruined a good pair of wool slacks that way and never knew why until I understood this. Think about that for a second. You did everything you thought was right, you cranked the heat, you pressed hard, you steamed it good, and the fabric still fought you or ended up ruined. That's the same story a lot of folks live with every single time they pick up an iron. Guessing at heat, guessing at pressure, guessing at when a shirt is finally done. If you're tired of guessing and you want the whole thing laid out in one place, that same instinct that brought you here is exactly what a fellow named Ryan put into a collection of books called the Complete Strike System. It's the full method. How to read what went wrong the moment it happens, how to set yourself up so you're not fighting the fabric before you even start, and a step-by-step roadmap so you stop guessing and get the same clean, repeatable result every time. It's a real, structured system built on how things actually work, not tips, not gadgets, not guesswork, and it's better than 380 pages of plain, tested content you can read tonight. No fancy tools required. And here's a little test you can run for free this very evening, straight from what we just covered. Touch a wet fingertip quick to your warm iron and listen. A gentle sizzle means it's ready for cottons. A loud, angry hiss means pull it back before you glaze something. That one check costs you nothing and tells you more than any dial. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. Now let me get back to what I found, because the next piece of this genuinely gave me a new respect for the folks who did all this by hand with no dial and no thermostat at all. Now here's a piece of history that gave me a whole new respect for the folks who did this by hand. Before dials and thermostats, a woman heating an iron on the stove had no way to read the temperature. So she tested it. She'd hold the iron close to her cheek to feel the heat, or, and this is the famous one, she'd touch a wet fingertip quickly to the sole plate and listen. A gentle sizzle meant it was ready for cottons. A loud, angry, spitting hiss meant too hot, pull it back, no dial. Just skill, passed mother to daughter. The order matters too, and this is a free trick that costs you nothing. Start with the garments that need the lowest heat, your synthetics and silks, while the iron is coming up to temperature. Then work your way up to the cottons and linens as you turn the dial higher. An iron heats up much faster than it cools down, so going low to high means you're never waiting around and never scorching something because the plate is still too hot from the last shirt. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right about now. You're thinking this all sounds like a lot of fuss. Sprinkling, rolling, distilled water, sorting by fabric. You're thinking, I just want to press a shirt before work. I don't have a barrel of rainwater and an afternoon to spare. I hear you. And this next part is for you specifically, because everything I've told you can be done tonight with only what's already in your house, and it takes almost no extra time at all. You don't need to buy distilled water this minute. If you have a kettle, boil your tap water and let it cool before you fill the iron. Boiling drives off some of the hardness and drops a good bit of the mineral content out, and it's far better than pouring straight cold tap water into a hot tank. It's what people did for years before you could buy water in a jug. You don't need a sprinkling basket either. Any spray bottle you already own works. An empty, well-rinsed cleaning bottle, a plant mister, an old hairspray bottle washed out. Mist the shirt lightly, roll it up, and go brush your teeth. By the time you come back, it's evenly damp and it'll press in one pass, and you don't need a fancy ironing board. Here's an old one that genuinely shocked me. Lay a piece of ordinary aluminum foil, shiny side up, right underneath your ironing board cover. That's it. The foil reflects the heat coming down from the iron back up into the fabric, so the cloth gets pressed from both sides at once. Your ironing goes noticeably faster, and thick spots like collars and cuffs and waistbands press flat in half the strokes. I did this with foil I already had in the drawer. Cost me nothing. Worked the first try. One more, and this is the one I use most. If a wrinkle just won't quit, lay a slightly damp cotton cloth, a thin dish towel, a pillowcase, an old handkerchief over the stubborn spot, and press through it. It's called a pressing cloth, and tailors have used them for over a century. The damp cloth turns to a burst of steam right at the fabric, exactly where you need it, and it protects delicate cloth from scorching and shine at the same time. That's how they get suits flawless. A damp rag and a hot iron. Nothing you have to order in the mail. So none of this is fuss. It's the opposite of fuss. Every one of these makes the job faster and gives you the same clean result every time, which is the whole point. Doing it the modern way, fighting a spitting iron over a dry shirt, is the version that actually wastes your evening. And once I understood all this, one thing started to bother me. If a bowl of water and a hot piece of metal outperforms my expensive steam iron, why has every iron I've ever bought gotten worse, not better? Let me tell you what I finally figured out, because this is where I got a little angry. The irons my grandparents used lasted decades. 50 years, some of them. They were solid metal, no electronics, nothing to break, and when something did go wrong, you could fix it yourself. Missus. Potts's iron from 1871 was designed so the parts came apart. The handle was separate. It was built to keep working, generation after generation. The iron I buy today is built to be thrown away. Sealed plastic body you can't open. A steam system that clogs with the very tap water they know most people are going to use. And when it clogs, there's no way to properly clean the inside, so you give up and buy another one. I told you I went through 6 or 7 irons. That's a couple $100, quietly, over the years, on a tool that should outlive me. And here's the part that really got me. They now sell you special ironing water. Little bottles of water, sometimes with a bit of scent, marked up to unbelievable prices, sold as the solution to a mineral problem that a $1 jug of distilled water or free rainwater or boiled tap water solves completely. They took a job a bowl of water did for free, wrapped it in plastic, sealed it shut, and sold it back to us as an appliance with a subscription of little scented refills on the side. The knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because there's no money in you knowing it. A woman in 1920 who could press a perfect shirt with a sad iron and a sprinkling bottle was nobody's customer. She didn't need a new iron every 2 years or a bottle of magic water. That kind of independence is exactly what got left out of the instruction manual, but the knowledge didn't die all the way. Somebody wrote it down. And that brings me to the thing I promised you at the start, the one I found buried in an old government bulletin, the trick that brings a dragging, sticking iron back to life in about 2 minutes. Let me set this up, because you need to know where it came from to trust it. In 1923, the United States government created something called the Bureau of Home Economics. The first person to lead it was a scientist named Louise Stanley, a woman with a doctorate in chemistry running a federal research bureau back when that was almost unheard of. Her job, and her team's job, was to study the actual science of running a home. How to launder, how to cook safely, how to iron. They ran real experiments and published the results in plain bulletins mailed out to households all across the country, for free. Buried in that body of work, in the guidance they put out around 1931 on the care of the iron itself, is the fix for the problem. Nobody today can seem to solve the iron that drags, sticks, and pulls at the fabric instead of gliding. Here's what happens. Over time, the bottom of your iron, the sole plate, picks up an invisible film, a little melted synthetic residue, a bit of starch buildup, some baked-on mineral haze. You can't always see it, but you can feel it. The iron stops sliding. It grabs at the shirt. You have to push harder, and when you push harder over damp cloth, you drag wrinkles instead of pressing them out. That right there is a huge source of inconsistency, and almost nobody thinks to check for it. The old fix uses one thing already in your kitchen cabinet: plain table salt. Here it is. Take a sheet of plain paper, a piece of brown paper bag is perfect, or a sheet of parchment, or even a plain piece of paper. Lay it flat on your ironing board. Pour a good spoonful of ordinary table salt onto it and spread it into a patch. Set your iron to a medium-high heat with the steam turned off, completely dry, no water. Then run the warm iron back and forth over the bed of salt, in circles and straight strokes, with light pressure, for a minute or two. The salt is mildly abrasive but soft enough that it won't scratch the metal, and as the iron warms it, the salt lifts that baked-on film right off the sole plate. You'll see the paper get discolored where the gunk transfers onto the salt. When you wipe the plate with a clean, dry cloth afterward, it's smooth as glass. The iron glides again like the day you bought it. 2 minutes. No chemicals, no special cleaner, no scratching, using salt that costs pennies. I did this to an iron I had already given up on sticky, dragging. I was one bad shirt away from tossing it. After the salt treatment, it slid across cotton like it was on ice. I honestly stood there stunned that something that simple had been sitting in an old bulletin for 90 years while I threw iron after iron in the trash. And if the plate is really far gone, sticky with melted synthetic, The same bulletins mention the pressing cloth trick from the tailor's trade going back to the 1800s, a little beeswax rubbed onto a cloth, then the warm iron passed over the waxed cloth to pick up the thinnest coat of wax. The wax fills in the microscopic roughness, and the iron glides. Cabinet makers and tailors both used wax the same way to make metal slide over wood and cloth. It's the same idea, hiding in two different old trades. Now think about the whole picture. The knowledge existed, real science, tested and written down by a chemist running a federal bureau in the 1920s and 30s. It got pushed aside because a household that can clean its own iron with a spoonful of salt doesn't buy a new one every couple of years. It was quietly preserved anyway, in bulletins sitting in archives and in the hands of a few grandmothers who never stopped doing it. And now you have it. That's the whole journey of almost every good thing I've recovered. It never stopped working. It just stopped being profitable for someone to remind you. So let me put it all together for you the way I do it now. Start to finish. I fill the tank with distilled water or boiled tap water if that's what I've got. I lightly mist my dry cottons and roll them up while the iron heats. I lay a sheet of foil under my board cover, shiny side up. I sort my pile, so I iron the low-heat synthetics first and finish with the hot cottons and linens. If the plate feels like it's dragging, I give it the salt treatment. And for any stubborn spot, I press through a damp cloth. That's it. My shirts come out crisp on the first pass every time, and I haven't bought a new iron in years. You just recovered something that was quietly taken from you, the plain ability to do an everyday thing well with your own two hands without buying one more thing to do it. That's really what all of this is about. You're the kind of person who trusts common sense over a clever sales pitch. Who'd rather fix the tool you own than replace it? Who suspects, correctly, that the folks who came before us knew a few things worth keeping? That instinct of yours is right, and it's worth more today than it's ever been. Now, I want to hear from you. Which one surprised you the most, the sprinkling and rolling the night before, or the spoonful of salt to bring a sticking iron back to life? Tell me in the comments. And if you've got an old ironing trick from your own mother or grandmother, one I didn't mention, please write it down below. This audience reads those comments. And that's exactly how we keep this knowledge from disappearing for good. Tell me where you're watching from, too. I love seeing how far this reaches. If any of this helped, come along with us. This isn't about following a channel. It's about a group of people quietly putting the old, practical knowledge back into everyday hands, the stuff that keeps money in your pocket and keeps you from depending on things built to break. And next time, I'm going to show you the forgotten way people kept their clothes smelling fresh and moth-free in a closet for an entire season. No chemical sprays, no plastic, just 3 things that were in every grandmother's dresser drawer. You'll never guess what the middle one is. I'll see you there. Now, this video showed you why it happens. But inside the Old Ways Almanac, I pick up right where we left off. All 3 fixes and that 1931 sole plate trick. And if something doesn't work for your iron, ask me directly. I answer you myself. No machine. You won't be doing this alone. Old Ways folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel any time, 1 click. Now that your strikes are getting more consistent, let me show you one strange little adjustment that finally gets you taking a clean divot every single time. It's right here, starting next, and it might just surprise you.